Emily's mornings had become painfully ordinary. The same kitchen, the same smell of coffee. The same polite good morning from her husband, Daniel, before he rushed out the door with his briefcase. They had been married for almost 10 years, but lately, their conversations felt like background noise, polite words without meaning. The love between them hadn't disappeared, but it had quieted like a song playing too softly to recognize. Emily often wondered if that was how marriages were supposed to feel after a decade steady but silent. That Tuesday morning in Boston, the rain came early, turning the city gray. Emily sat by the window, watching the drops trace uneven paths down the glass. She used to love the rain. Now, it only made her feel trapped. She scrolled absent-mindedly through her phone, checking messages, reading news headlines, pretending not to notice how empty the house felt. Daniel had called earlier saying he'd be late again. Meetings, clients, travel, always something. She told him she understood, though part of her DIDN single quotes tell her phone buzzed again. A notification blinked on the screen. Aaron sent you a message. Emily froze. The name hit her like a sudden gust of wind. It had been 12 years since she last saw that name. 12 years since she'd last spoken to him. Aaron had been her college love, the kind that never really left her heart. They'd spent 2 years together before life pushed them in different directions. She'd gone into marketing. He'd gone into architecture. Their breakup had been quiet but painful, not because of betrayal, but because timing hadn't been kind. Her heart raced as she opened the message. Hey, Emily, I saw your profile on LinkedIn. I'm back in town for a while. Thought it'd be nice to catch up. Just coffee, nothing weird. For a long moment, she just stared at the message, her thumb hovering over the keyboard. Just coffee. It sounded harmless, but deep down, she knew what harmless could become. She could almost hear her own heartbeat echoing in the room. She thought about deleting the message, pretending she'd never seen it. But her curiosity was stronger than her caution. Hi, Aaron. Wow, it's been forever. Sure, coffee sounds fine. She hit send before she could change her mind. That night, Daniel called to say he'd be staying at the office late. Emily told him to take care, then sat in silence, staring at the city lights outside. She wondered why she'd agreed to see Aaron. It wasn't like she wanted anything to happen. Maybe she just wanted to remember who she used to be. Someone who laughed more, dreamed bigger, felt seen. 2 days later, she stood outside a cafe downtown, her umbrella trembling slightly in her hand. The rain had stopped, but the air was cool, sharp, and filled with the smell of wet pavement. Through the glass, she saw him sitting by the window, older, broader shoulders. A few lines around his eyes, but the same calm smile she remembered. For a moment, she hesitated. Then she walked in. Emily, he said, standing up. His voice still had that warmth that used to make her heart slow down. Aaron, she breathed, smiling nervously. You look the same? You don't, he said softly. You look even better. They sat down, ordered coffee, and fell into conversation like no time had passed. He told her about his travels, the projects he'd worked on, the cities he'd seen. She told him about her job in marketing, about Daniel, though she kept it brief. Every time she said her husband's name, something inside her felt uncertain, like a note that didn't fit the melody as they talked. She found herself laughing, really laughing, for the first time in a long while. He still remembered her quirks, how she always stirred her coffee twice before drinking it, how she tapped her nails when she was thinking. Those little things Daniel never seemed to notice anymore. When they finished their drinks, Aaron smiled. It's strange, he said. You're exactly how I remember you, but also not at all. What do you mean? She asked. He looked thoughtful. You used to have this light in you. You talked about writing, traveling, starting your own business. Do you still think about that? Emily blinked, realizing she hadn't thought about those dreams in years. No, she said quietly. Life got busy. He nodded, and for a moment there was silence, the kind that said more than words could. Then he smiled again, softly. Well, maybe some lights never go out. They just wait. When they said goodbye outside, the wind picked up. Emily held her umbrella tightly as Aaron walked her to her car. Before she got in, he said, I thought about you sometimes. More than I should have, probably. Her heart skipped a beat. She forced a smile. I didn't, she lied. But the truth followed her all the way home, that night. Daniel was already asleep when she got in. She stood by the bed, watching him breathe, the rise and fall of his chest, steady and calm. She tried to feel what she used to feel, love, comfort, safety, but something had shifted. It wasn't that she loved him less. It was that, somewhere inside her, a part of her that had been sleeping for years had just woken up, over the next few days. She tried to forget about Aaron. She threw herself into work, met friends for lunch, cooked Daniel's favorite meals. But every so often, she'd find herself glancing at her phone, waiting for a message that didn't come. And when it finally did, a simple "hope your week's going okay," she felt her pulse quicken all over again. They started texting casually, harmlessly. Jokes about old college memories, favorite movies, the weather. But beneath the surface, there was something unspoken, a quiet pull neither of them mentioned, but both felt. One afternoon he texted her, "Would you want to grab lunch sometime?" Just to catch up again. She stared at the message for a long time. She knew she shouldn't. She knew how oozily one lunch could become two, how Oosely's old feelings could find their way back. But her heart betrayed her reason. "Sure," she typed. "Just lunch." That Friday they met at a small restaurant by the harbor. The sky was clear, the water calm, and the air smelled of salt and sunlight. They talked for hours about work, about life, about how fast everything seemed to be passing them by. When they walked out, Aaron looked at her and said, "You seem lonely." Emily blinked, surprised. "I'm not," she said automatically. He smiled gently. "I didn't say you were alone. I said lonely." His words stayed with her all night. She sat in her car before going inside, staring at her reflection in the rearview mirror. The woman looking back at her didn't seem like the one she used to know. Her eyes looked tired, not from lack of sleep, but from holding everything in. When she went inside, Daniel greeted her with a distracted smile, barely looking up from his laptop. "Long day?" he asked. "Yeah," she whispered, hanging her coat. "Just a long day." Later that night, when he fell asleep beside her, she lay awake listening to the rain return outside. Her phone buzzed once. She reached for it, Aaron again. "You still up?" "Yeah," she replied. "Can't sleep," he texted back. "Thinking too much." "About what?" she asked, though she already knew. "About things that never really end." Her hand trembled as she read the words. She didn't reply. But her silence said everything. Emily closed her eyes and tried to remind herself that she wasn't the kind of person who lied. That she had built her life on honesty, commitment, trust. But deep down, she knew that something had shifted. A quiet lie had already been told. Not to Daniel, but to herself. And as the rain fell harder outside, she realized that sometimes betrayal doesn't start with an action. It starts with a thought. One you let stay just a little too long the next morning. Daniel kissed her goodbye before leaving for another trip. She smiled back, pretending everything was normal. But as soon as the door closed, she stood in silence. Her heart heavy with the truth, she couldn't speak. The lie she never planned to tell had already begun. Emily thought she could control it. The feelings, the messages, the pull she felt every time Aaron's name lit up her phone. She told herself it was just old memories, nothing dangerous, nothing real. But as the days passed, those messages became the brightest moments in her day. What started as polite check-ins soon turned into longer, deeper conversations. They spoke about everything, regrets, dreams, the people they had become. Emily had never meant for it to go this far, but every time she tried to stop, she COULDN, single quotes. T.O. meanwhile, had grown busier than ever. His company was preparing for a major project overseas, which meant late nights and weekends away. He always apologized, always promised they'd take a trip soon, but Emily had stopped believing it. The distance between them wasn't measured in miles, it was in silence. She didn't blame him. She just missed being seen. One evening, Emily was driving home from work when her phone buzzed. It was Aaron again. "I'm downtown. Just finished a meeting. Want to grab a coffee before you head home?" She hesitated at the red light, her fingers trembling over the screen. She knew she shouldn't. She knew what this could become. But then her loneliness spoke louder than her reason. "Sure," she replied. 15 minutes. The cafe was quiet that evening, filled with the soft hum of conversations and the smell of roasted coffee beans. Aaron was already there, waiting by the window, smiling the way he always used to, calm, warm, easy. When she sat down, he handed her a cup of her favorite drink. "Still 2 sugars, right?" he asked. Emily smiled, surprised he remembered. "You have a good memory. I remember everything about you," he said softly. The words hung between them like a truth neither wanted to admit. They talked for an hour, maybe 2, about small things that didn't matter and big things they didn't dare to name. When she finally stood to leave, Aaron reached out and gently touched her hand. It was innocent, brief, but it sent a wave through her she hadn't felt in years. "Emily," said, his voice quiet but sure, "you deserve to be happy. Whatever that means." She didn't answer. She just nodded, whispered goodbye, and left, heart racing, hands trembling, unsure if she was more afraid of what had just happened or what hadn't. That night, Daniel called again from his hotel room in Chicago. He talked about meetings, deadlines, and the long flight home next week. Emily listened, responding when needed, but her thoughts were somewhere else. When he finally said, "I miss you," she wanted to say it back, but the words caught in her throat. After they hung up, she stood in the kitchen, staring at her reflection in the window. Her own face looked unfamiliar, like she'd become someone she didn't recognize. She told herself nothing had happened, that she hadn't crossed a line. But in her heart, she knew lines didn't always need to be physical to be broken. Over the next few weeks, she and Aaron kept meeting by accident at first, then on purpose. Sometimes it was lunch. Sometimes it was just a walk by the river. They never did anything wrong, but the air between them was thick with everything they didn't say. Emily found herself smiling again, laughing again, even feeling alive again. But every time she came home, the guilt followed her like a shadow. One evening, she came home to find Daniel sitting at the kitchen table, looking exhausted. "I booked us a weekend trip," he said with a hopeful smile. "Just the 2 of us. I thought it might be nice to get away." Her heart sank. She should have been happy he was trying, after all, but instead she felt trapped. "That's sweet," she said carefully. "When?" "This weekend," he replied. "I already cleared your schedule with your boss. You've been working too hard." Emily forced a smile. "That's great," she said, though her voice sounded distant. That night, lying in bed beside him, she couldn't sleep. Her phone buzzed once. "Aaron, again. Missed talking to you today?" She stared at the screen for a long time before typing back. "I can't talk for a few days. Going away with Daniel." There was a long pause before his reply came. "He's lucky. Don't forget that." The words hit her harder than she expected. She turned off her phone, rolled over, and stared at the ceiling. Daniel's breathing beside her was steady, peaceful. She closed her eyes, but instead of sleep, she saw Aaron's face, his eyes, his quiet understanding. And she realized how dangerous it had all become. The next morning, they left for their trip. The cabin Daniel had booked was small but beautiful, hidden in the woods near a lake. The scenery was peaceful, but Emily felt uneasy. Daniel tried to make her laugh, cooked her dinner, even surprised her with wine and music. For a while, it almost felt like the old days. They talked, shared stories, and even danced under the string lights he'd hung outside. But later that night, when he reached for her hand, she hesitated just for a second, but long enough for him to notice. He didn't say anything, just looked away quietly. "Daniel," she whispered, guilt rising in her throat. "I'm sorry. I've just been tired lately, stressed." He smiled faintly. "It's okay. I know I've been distant too. I just want us to find our way back. Those words, "find our way back," stayed with her. She wanted that too, or at least she thought she did. But she also couldn't stop thinking about the part of her that had already gone somewhere else. When they returned home on Sunday, things between them seemed lighter. For the first time in months, they shared a quiet dinner together, no distractions. Daniel talked about taking more time off. Emily promised to cut down on work. For a moment, she believed maybe this could still be fixed. Then Monday came. And so did another message from Aaron. "How was your trip?" She shouldn't have replied. She knew that. But temptation had a quiet voice that always sounded like reason. "It was fine," she wrote. "Peaceful." "But you don't sound peaceful," he replied. Her chest tightened. She didn't answer. But an hour later, she found herself standing outside his office downtown, her heart pounding like it used to when she was 20. He met her in the lobby, surprised but happy. "Emily," he said. "What are you doing here?" "I don't know," she whispered. "I just needed to see you." They went for a walk near the harbor, the city lights flickering on the water. Neither of them said much. When they stopped, he turned to her, his expression serious. "You shouldn't be here," he said softly. "I know," she said. He looked at her for a long time. "Then why are you—" She couldn't answer, because the truth would break her in that silence. The air between them shifted, not in a way that was physical, but emotional, deep, undeniable. For a moment, it felt like time had folded in on itself, bringing back everything she'd tried to bury. "I've missed you," he said finally. Voice barely a whisper. Emily's eyes filled with tears she didn't expect. "You shouldn't say that," she said. But her voice trembled. "Then tell me you don't feel it too," he replied gently. She couldn't, and he didn't need her to. They stood there in silence, both knowing they'd crossed something invisible, a line of the heart that couldn't easily be undone. When Emily drove home that night, she felt like she was carrying two worlds on her shoulders, one built on truth, the other on longing. And though she hadn't done anything she could name as wrong, her heart knew otherwise. She walked inside to find Daniel asleep on the couch, the TV still on. She covered him with a blanket and sat beside him quietly, guilt pressing down on her like a weight she couldn't lift. Outside, the rain had started again, soft, steady, endless. She looked out the window and whispered to herself, "What am I doing?" But the answer didn't come. Only the echo of her choices did. And deep down, she knew this wasn't the end. Something had been set in motion, something that couldn't be undone. The morning after that rain-soaked night, Emily woke up feeling hollow. The sound of Daniel moving around the kitchen reminded her of everything real in her life. The smell of coffee, the quiet hum of the house, the man who had loved her for years without question. But her heart was somewhere else, lost between guilt and desire for something she couldn't even name anymore. At breakfast, Daniel smiled at her gently. "You slept late," he said. "I made pancakes." "Your favorite?" She forced a smile, grateful and sad at the same time. "Thank you. That's sweet." He leaned against the counter, looking at her like he was trying to read something in her face. "You've seemed different lately," he said softly. "Not angry, just somewhere else." Emily's fork froze halfway to her mouth. She looked at him, wanting to tell the truth, but afraid of what that would mean. "I'm just tired," she said finally. "That's all." He nodded slowly, but she could tell he didn't believe her. The silence stretched between them like a wall neither could climb. After Daniel left for work, Emily sat at the kitchen table for a long time, staring at the untouched pancakes. Her phone buzzed again. It was Aaron. "Can we talk?" Her heart skipped. She knew this couldn't keep going, but the part of her that felt alive when she was around him was louder than her reason. "Where?" she replied. "The park. By the old fountain." The park was quiet when she arrived, golden leaves drifting across the path. Aaron was already there, hands in his coat pockets, looking both nervous and relieved when he saw her. "Emily," he said softly, as if her name itself hurt to say. She stopped a few feet away. "We can't keep doing this," she said quickly. "Whatever this is, it's not right." He nodded, eyes fixed on the ground. "I know." I've been trying to stay away, but I can't. Every time I think I've moved on, I end up thinking about you again." Her heart ached at his words. "You can't say things like that." "Then tell me you don't feel it," he said, looking up at her. She wanted to. God, she wanted to. But her silence told him everything. Aaron stepped closer. "You deserve to feel something real again," he whispered. "You deserve to be happy." Tears burned in her eyes. "You don't understand," she said. "This isn't just about me. I have a life, a husband who trusts me. I can't throw that away because of something that might not even last." He nodded, but his expression stayed pained. "I get it. But don't lie to yourself, Emily. You're already halfway gone." His words hit her like a wave. She turned and walked away before he could say anything else. As she drove home, tears streamed down her face, and for the first time in years, she felt completely lost. That night, Daniel came home early, carrying takeout from her favorite restaurant. "I thought we could have a quiet night in," he said with that warm smile she used to love so much. Emily tried to match his energy, but inside she felt a war raging. The guilt was too heavy now, pressing down on her until she could barely breathe. Halfway through dinner, Daniel reached across the table and took her hand. "I love you, Em," he said simply. "No matter what's going on in your head, I just want you to know that." Something inside her broke. She set down her fork and stared at him through tears. "Daniel, there's something I need to tell you." Keha's smile faded. "What is it?" She took a deep breath, her voice shaking. "I've been talking to someone from my past." He said nothing at first, just stared at her like he was trying to understand what he'd just heard. "Talking," he repeated quietly. She nodded. "That's all. But it shouldn't have happened. I let it go too far emotionally, not physically. I'm sorry. I don't know why I did it." He raised a hand to stop her. "Emily, please, just tell me the truth. Do you still love me?" The question hung in the air like a blade. She looked at him, her heart breaking. "Yes," she whispered. "But I don't know if I love myself right now." Daniel leaned back, running a hand through his hair. For a long time, he said nothing. Finally, he stood. "I need some air," he said quietly, and walked out. Emily sat at the table long after he'd gone, her hands trembling. The house felt painfully empty the next day. Daniel didn't come home after work. He texted her that he needed space, that he was staying with a friend for a few days. Emily understood. She didn't even blame him. She had broken something sacred. The following week was a blur. She went to work, came home, and avoided everyone. She didn't reach out to Aaron again. She deleted his messages, erased his number, and promised herself she'd never look back. But one evening, she saw him waiting outside her office building. "Aaron," she said, her voice low, "you can't be here." "I just wanted to make sure you're okay," he said. "You look lost." "I am," she admitted. "But I can't fix that by being here with you." He looked at her for a long time, then nodded. "Then promise me something," he said. "Promise you'll find what makes you happy, even if it's not me." She swallowed hard. "I promise." He smiled faintly, then turned and walked away. She stood there, watching until he disappeared into the crowd, realizing that sometimes love wasn't about holding on. It was about letting go. Weeks passed before Daniel finally came home. When he walked through the door, Emily's heart raced. He looked tired, older somehow. "Can we talk?" he asked. She nodded, leading him to the living room. "I've had time to think," he said. "About us, about everything. I won't pretend it doesn't hurt. But I also know people make mistakes when they're hurting. I can't forget what you did, but I also can't ignore all the years we've built together." Tears filled her eyes. "I don't expect forgiveness," she said. "But I want to make things right. I want to earn back your trust." He nodded slowly. "Then let's try," he said. "One day at a time." That night, they sat together quietly, no grand gestures. No sudden healing, just the fragile beginning of something new. In the following months, Emily focused on repairing what she had broken. She and Daniel went to counseling, started taking walks together again, learned how to talk, really talk about their fears and needs. It wasn't easy. Some days felt heavier than others, but slowly. Something began to shift. One evening, as they sat watching the sunset from their porch, Daniel turned to her. "You know," he said, "I used to think love was about being perfect for each other. But maybe it's just about choosing each other even when it's hard." Emily smiled, her eyes glistening. "Then I choose you," she said softly. He took her hand and squeezed it gently. "Then we'll be okay." Months later, Emily found herself walking alone through that same park where she'd met Aaron. The air was warm, filled with the sound of laughter and life. She stopped by the fountain, remembering the moment that had changed everything, the choices, the pain, the lessons. She wasn't proud of what had happened, but she was grateful for what it had taught her. That love couldn't grow in shadows, that honesty mattered more than desire, and that sometimes forgiveness was the bravest thing of all. She sat on the bench, took a deep breath, and smiled to herself. For the first time in a long while, she felt peaceful, not because everything was perfect, but because she finally understood herself. When she went home that evening, Daniel was cooking dinner. He looked up and grinned. "You're late," he said playfully. "Got caught in traffic," she replied, her heart full. He kissed her forehead and handed her a glass of wine. "Two new beginnings," he said. "Two new beginnings," she echoed as they ate together. The house filled with warmth and laughter again. The past was still there. It always would be, but it no longer owned her. She had faced her mistakes, made her choice, and chosen love, not escape. And this time, she meant it. Daniel Harper had spent years designing rooms that reflected other people's lives, yet his own felt empty. He was a talented interior designer from Portland, known for his eye for comfort and detail. But when he received a call from a new client, something in her voice made him pause. Her name was Elaine Matthews, and she wanted to redesign her bedroom. "It needs a new beginning," she had said softly over the phone. Those words stayed with him longer than he expected. On a bright Monday morning, Daniel parked outside a large Victorian-style house on the corner of Maple Street. The neighborhood was quiet, with trees shedding golden leaves onto the sidewalks. The house looked beautiful, but tired, as though it had seen too many seasons of joy and loss. He took his notebook and sketches, straightened his jacket, and knocked on the door. Elaine opened it almost immediately. She looked to be in her early 40s, tall with warm hazel eyes and a calm, graceful posture. Her face carried traces of beauty mixed with sadness, the kind that makes people wonder about the stories behind the eyes. "Mr. Harper?" she asked, her voice polite but distant. "Daniel," he replied with a smile, extending his hand. She shook it gently and stepped aside to let him in. The house was neat, elegant, but strangely quiet. There were no personal pictures on the walls. No laughter or life in the corners, just an air of emptiness. "I'd like the bedroom to feel new," she said, leading him upstairs. Her tone was firm, but her eyes betrayed vulnerability. "I don't sleep well here anymore. I want it to feel different." Daniel nodded, understanding more than she said. He followed her into the master bedroom, a large space with soft gray walls and white curtains. It was beautiful in design, but hollow in feeling. The bed looked untouched, and the nightstand held no signs of personal life. "How long have you lived here?" he asked. "Almost 10 years, she said quietly. "But it feels like someone else's house now." He didn't push for more. Experience had taught him that rooms tell their owners' stories without words. This one spoke of heartbreak, of something once loved and now lost. They spent the morning discussing colors and materials. She leaned toward soft tone screens. Wood, gentle light. "I don't want bold," she said. "I just want peace." As they worked, Daniel noticed how carefully she spoke, as if choosing her words to protect herself. He admired that quiet strength. When he asked if she preferred modern or classic touches, she smiled faintly. "I'm not sure anymore. Maybe something that feels alive again." By the time he packed up his samples, the sun had shifted low through the window, casting long shadows across the room. Elaine stood near the light, looking out at the falling leaves. "Do you ever think spaces remember?" she asked suddenly. Daniel paused. "You mean the memories of people who've lived in them?" "Yes," she whispered. "Sometimes I feel like these walls still hear his voice. He didn't ask who he was. Some things don't need names." That night, Daniel couldn't stop thinking about her. He had met many clients, some demanding, some distant, but none had stayed in his thoughts like Elaine. There was something about her sadness that felt familiar, as though it mirrored his own loneliness. He didn't like crossing the line between work and personal life. But his heart didn't seem to care. A few days later, he returned with more sketches and ideas. Elaine greeted him with a softer expression this time. She was wearing a loose cream sweater, her hair tied casually. The air between them felt different, less formal, more human. As he laid out the samples on the table, she watched him quietly. "You really love what you do," she said. Daniel smiled. "I think spaces can heal people, if you design them right." Her lips curved slightly. "Then maybe you can help me heal too." He looked up at her, unsure how to respond. For a moment, their eyes held something unspoken. She looked away first, pretending to examine the sketches. Over the next week, the project became more than work. They shared coffee during breaks, talked about books, travel, and little details of life. She told him about growing up near Seattle, about how she once dreamed of being an artist but chose stability instead. He told her about his divorce years ago and how designing homes had become his way of rebuilding himself. Their stories overlapped like pieces of a puzzle neither of them expected to fit. One afternoon, as they discussed lighting options, Daniel noticed a framed picture tucked behind some papers on a shelf. It showed Elaine and a man smiling at the beach. She saw him notice it and sighed. "That's my ex-husband," she said quietly. "He left a year ago. I thought time would fix things, but it hasn't." "I'm sorry," Daniel said softly. "Don't be," she replied, forcing a small smile. "Maybe it's good. Maybe this is what I needed to start again." He nodded, sensing how hard it must have been for her to say that when he came by later that week to finalize furniture choices. The sky was gray and heavy with rain. The house felt warmer this time, the fireplace lit, soft music playing faintly from another room. Elaine offered him tea and sat across from him. Her posture relaxed, but her eyes searching. "You've changed the way I look at this room," she said. "When you first came, I just wanted to erase the past. But now, it feels like maybe I can build something new instead." "That's the point of design," Daniel said, smiling. "It's not just about walls and paint. It's about people." She looked at him for a long moment before whispering, "And what about you? Do you ever design for yourself?" Daniel hesitated, surprised by the question. "No," he admitted. "Maybe because I'm afraid of what I'd find if I did." The silence between them was comfortable, filled with understanding. They didn't need to explain the loneliness that both carried was already visible in the spaces they occupied. When Daniel left that evening, the rain had stopped. Elaine stood by the door, her hand resting lightly on the frame. "Thank you for coming today," she said softly. "You've done more than you realize." He smiled. "See you tomorrow?" She nodded. Yes, tomorrow. As he walked down the steps, he felt something unfamiliar, hope mixed with hesitation. He told himself it was just the satisfaction of doing good work. But deep down, he knew it was something more. That night, Daniel lay awake thinking about her voice, the way she smiled when she let her guard down, the softness in her eyes when she talked about starting over. He felt both drawn and cautious, knowing how fragile such moments could be. Yet the thought of her lingered like a quiet song that refused to fade. The next morning, a message arrived on his phone. "Can you come early tomorrow? I want to show you something new for the design." Daniel typed back, "Of course, I'll be there." He didn't know it yet, but what Elaine wanted to show him wasn't about furniture or color, it was about trust. Something deeper was beginning to unfold between them. As the rain returned outside his window, Daniel realized this project was no longer just about redesigning a bedroom. It was about two broken souls accidentally finding the courage to feel again. And though neither of them said it aloud, Both knew that their lives were about to change forever. The next morning, Daniel arrived earlier than usual. The air carried the crispness of autumn, and the scent of rain still lingered from the night before. Elaine's house stood quiet and graceful under the gray sky, its tall windows glowing faintly from the lights inside. He rang the doorbell, and she opened the door with a soft smile that seemed different, warmer, yet hesitant. "I didn't wake you too early, did I?" he asked, stepping inside. "No," she said, shaking her head. "I've been up for a while. I wanted to show you something." Her voice had a thoughtful edge. She led him upstairs toward the bedroom that was now half-transformed walls freshly painted, sunlight spilling through cream-colored curtains. The new furniture had arrived, but it was still wrapped. A quiet excitement filled the space. "I rearranged the layout last night," she said, handing him a folded sketch. "Could you tell me if this makes sense?" Daniel took the paper, surprised at the effort she'd made. Her design wasn't perfect, but it showed creativity. "This is good," he said sincerely. "You've got an instinct for space." She laughed softly. "Maybe I've been watching you too closely." There was a pause. Her words hung in the air longer than intended. She looked away quickly, embarrassed by her honesty. Daniel smiled, trying to ease the tension. "Well, if that's the case, you're a quick learner." They worked side by side that morning, moving furniture, testing lighting angles, and choosing fabrics. The easy flow between them felt natural. Occasionally, their hands brushed when passing tools or samples, and though both noticed, neither spoke about it. The connection was quiet but undeniable. Around noon, Elaine brought out sandwiches and coffee. They sat by the window overlooking the garden. It had started raining again, the sound of soft drops tapping against the glass. She looked outside and said, "You know, this house always felt too big for me. It used to be full of noise, laughter, and now it's just echoes." Daniel looked at her, sensing the heaviness behind her words. "You said before that you wanted this room to feel alive again. I think you're doing that not just with color or design, but with yourself." She turned to him, studying his face for a long moment. "Do you really think people can start over after everything falls apart?" "Yes," he said firmly. "I think sometimes the right person or moment can remind you how to breathe again." Something shifted in her expression, a flicker of warmth, gratitude, and something deeper. She nodded quietly, her fingers tracing the edge of her coffee cup. After lunch, they resumed work. Elaine insisted on helping move a heavy dresser, though Daniel warned her not to strain herself. "I'm stronger than I look," she said playfully. "I don't doubt that," he replied. Smiling, as they adjusted the placement of a mirror, Daniel caught a reflection of her standing close behind him. Their eyes met in the glass, and for a brief second, time seemed to slow. She looked away quickly, brushing her hair aside, pretending to focus on something else. The tension was delicate, almost fragile. Neither of them wanted to cross any lines. Yet something in the air told them they were already standing on one. Later that afternoon, thunder rumbled outside. The rain grew heavier, turning the world beyond the windows into a blur of gray. Daniel packed up his tools, ready to leave, but Elaine stopped him. "You don't have to rush out in this weather," she said. "Stay for a bit. I'll make more coffee." He hesitated, then nodded. "Sure, I'd like that." They sat in the living room as the storm deepened. Elaine lit a candle, its flame flickering softly between them. The light played across her face, making her look both strong and vulnerable. "Do you ever get tired of being alone?" she asked suddenly. Daniel took a moment to answer. "I used to think I liked it," he said quietly. "It was peaceful. But lately, I'm not so sure. Silence starts to sound different when there's no one to share it with." She nodded, her expression thoughtful. "After my husband left, I told myself I was fine, that I didn't need anyone. But the truth is, the silence has been louder than I ever imagined." The honesty between them felt heavy but comforting. It was as if both had spent too long hiding behind polite smiles. And now, finally, someone was listening. When the storm finally eased, Daniel stood to leave. "I'll finish the lighting fixtures tomorrow," he said. She walked him to the door. her hand lightly brushing his arm as she opened it. "Thank you for staying," she said softly. "It's been nice." He looked at her for a long moment, then nodded. "It has." The next day, Daniel returned early again, carrying boxes of decorative pieces and fabrics. Elaine greeted him with the same quiet warmth. This time she seemed lighter, more at ease. They spent hours setting up the final touches, the new bed frame, the wall art, the soft lamps that gave the room a golden glow. When they finished, Elaine stood in the middle of the room looking around in silence. Her eyes shimmered with emotion. "It's perfect," she whispered. "I can't believe it's the same room." Daniel smiled. "It feels different because you've changed too." She turned toward him, eyes meeting his. "You've done more than redesign this room, Daniel. You've brought me back to life." He opened his mouth to speak, but words failed him. All he could manage was a quiet, "I'm glad I could help." They stood there for a moment, neither moving, both aware of the invisible thread pulling them closer. Finally, Elaine broke the silence with a small laugh. "You must think I'm being dramatic." "Not at all," he said gently. "Sometimes it takes courage just to feel again." The next few days were quieter. The project was nearly complete, yet Daniel found excuses to stop by to adjust a curtain, to check lighting, to finalize details. In truth, he didn't want the reason to see her to end. One Friday evening, she called unexpectedly. "Can you come by? There's something I want to show you before you close the project." When he arrived, the house was dimly lit, soft jazz playing in the background. She met him at the door, wearing a deep green dress that made her eyes glow even warmer. "I cooked dinner," she said, smiling nervously, "to say thank you." Daniel hesitated. "Elaine, you didn't have to. I wanted to," she interrupted softly. "Please." He followed her into the dining room. The table was set simply but beautifully, candles, white plates, a small vase of tulips. The meal smelled wonderful. They talked for hours about life, regret, second chances. The air between them was filled with laughter and silences that spoke just as loudly. For the first time in years, Daniel felt like he wasn't on the outside of someone's life looking in. After dinner, she led him upstairs to show him the finished bedroom. The room glowed softly under the warm light, calm and inviting. Elaine stood near the window, looking out into the night. "Do you ever think some people are meant to find each other at the wrong time, just to learn what love should have been?" she asked quietly. Daniel walked closer. "Maybe, or maybe they find each other to remind themselves that love never really disappears, just hides until you're ready again." She turned toward him, her eyes glistening. "You make everything sound so simple." Not," he said softly, "but it's real." They stood there, silence stretching between them like a fragile bridge. Neither spoke, but the emotions were clear: understanding, connection. Something dangerously close to love. When Daniel finally said goodnight, she followed him to the door once again. "You've changed more than this house," she said, her voice low. "You've changed me." He didn't answer. He couldn't. He simply smiled, nodded, and walked out into the cool night, his heart heavier than before, because deep down, he knew what was happening between them was something neither of them planned for, something that could heal or break both of them. And as he drove away, the image of Elaine standing by the doorway stayed with him, as if her eyes had quietly asked him not to go. Daniel tried to focus on work the next few days, but Elaine's face kept returning to his mind, her voice, her quiet strength, the way her eyes held sadness and hope at the same time. He told himself it was just professional admiration, that he respected her for her resilience. But deep inside, he knew it was more. Something about her had stirred a part of him he thought was long gone. He had finished the project. Technically, there was no reason to return to her house. Yet, when her message came that weekend, "Could you come by? I need your advice on something small." He didn't even hesitate. When he arrived, she greeted him at the door with that same soft smile, her eyes warm but unsure. The house felt quieter than usual, as if holding its breath. "I hope I'm not bothering you," she said. "You never do," he replied simply. She led him upstairs. The bedroom was complete, glowing softly with evening light. But she had rearranged a few things. The chair moved closer to the window, new flowers on the nightstand. "I can't seem to get it right," she said. "It still feels incomplete." Daniel looked around and then back at her. "Maybe it's not the room that feels incomplete." Her eyes met his, a flicker of emotion passing between them. She looked away quickly. "You always say things that make me think too much," smiled slightly. "Maybe thinking isn't bad. Sometimes that's where healing begins." She sat down on the edge of the bed, her posture soft but tense. "You know, when my husband left, I told myself I'd never let anyone in again. It felt easier to build walls than rooms." Daniel stood by the window, his voice quiet. "And yet here you are, redesigning everything." She laughed faintly. "I didn't plan to. You just showed up." The silence that followed was filled with meaning neither dared to name. Outside, the wind brushed against the glass. The fading sunlight painted the room in amber hues. Finally, she said, "What about you, Daniel? You always listen, but never talk about yourself." He took a breath. "There's not much to tell. I used to believe in building things that lasted home's love, trust, but somewhere along the way, I lost that. My wife left years ago. Since then, I've been designing for others, not really living for myself." Elaine looked at him quietly. "Maybe that's why we understand each other. We both built beautiful spaces for others while our own hearts stayed empty." He turned to face her, and for a long moment, neither moved. It was the kind of silence that carried more truth than words ever could. Then her voice softened. "You've changed this house, Daniel. But more than that, you reminded me how it feels to be seen again." He stepped closer, not touching her, but close enough to feel the pull between them. "You've done the same for me," he said. "You've made me remember what connection feels like." Her eyes glistened. "Then why does it hurt so much?" "Because," he whispered, "we both know how fragile it is." They stood like that for what felt like forever, two people standing in the middle of something beautiful and dangerous. Knowing they couldn't stay there forever, Elaine looked away, her voice trembling. "You should go, Daniel, before this becomes something we can't undo." He wanted to argue, to tell her that what they had wasn't wrong, that it was human. But he saw the tears in her eyes and knew she was right. He nodded slowly. "If that's what you want, it's what I need," she said, though her voice didn't sound convinced. He walked toward the door, every step heavy. But before leaving, he turned back one last time. "Take care of yourself, Elaine. You deserve peace." She nodded but said nothing. For weeks after that, Daniel buried himself in work. He tried to forget her, the house, her laughter, her eyes. But the memory stayed like a song he couldn't stop hearing. Every project felt empty now. Every room he designed seemed to echo her absence. One rainy evening, he found himself driving past her street without meaning to. The lights in her house were on. He parked for a moment, debating whether to knock or keep driving. He almost left, but then he saw her silhouette by the window, still and thoughtful. Something inside him broke. He stepped out of the car and walked to the door. When she opened it, surprise flickered in her eyes, followed by something softer. "Daniel," she whispered, "why are you here?" "I don't know," he admitted. "Maybe because some spaces don't feel right when you leave them unfinished." For a moment, she said nothing. Then she stepped aside, letting him in. The house looked different, warmer, brighter. She had added touches of color, new curtains, a few family photos. "I kept working on it," she said quietly. "Just like you taught me." "Looks beautiful," he said. She smiled faintly. "It's starting to feel like home again." Stood in silence for a while. Finally, Elaine spoke, her voice steady but full of emotion. "You were right, Daniel. I wasn't ready before, but I think I am now. To feel again. To start again." He looked at her, heart pounding. "Are you sure?" She nodded. "Yes, but this time, I don't want to build something out of loneliness. I want to build it out of truth." He stepped closer, his voice low. "Then maybe we can start with honesty." "What truth?" She asked. "That I've missed you every day since I left. he said simply. Her eyes filled with tears, not of sadness, but release. I missed you too. They didn't rush into words or promises. They just stood there, finally letting silence mean peace instead of distance. Over the next few months, they began to see each other more not as designer and client, but as two people learning to trust again. They met for coffee, shared stories, and took long walks by the river. Elaine started painting again, rediscovering her joy. Daniel found himself designing with heart instead of habit. One spring afternoon, he visited her house again. The bedroom, the room that had started, everything looked brighter than ever. Sunlight poured in through the open window, filling the space with warmth. Elaine stood there arranging fresh flowers in a vase. You know, she said, smiling, I was thinking of changing the curtains again. What do you think? He laughed softly. You don't need my opinion anymore. You've become the designer now. She looked at him thoughtfully. Maybe, but some things are still better when done together. He walked closer, placing his hand gently on hers. Then let's keep building together. The air around them felt calm, complete. There was no rush, no fear, just quiet understanding. Months later, when Daniel looked back on everything, he realized the irony of it all. He had come to redesign a bedroom, but in truth, both of them had redesigned their lives. Elaine's house became more than a project. It became the place where broken hearts remembered how to feel again. End. Every time the morning light touched the soft curtains, Daniel saw it as a reminder that healing doesn't always arrive loudly. Sometimes it comes quietly through shared laughter, unspoken words, and the courage to start again. Their story wasn't about passion or perfection. It was about finding connection when neither expected it, about rediscovering warmth after years of coldness. It was about two people who didn't save each other but reminded one another how to live. And as they sat together one evening, watching the sunset paint the walls golden, Elaine smiled and said, You know, Daniel, when you first came here, I thought you'd just change my room. I didn't know you'd end up changing everything. He smiled back, his voice soft but certain. I think you changed me more than I changed anything else. They stayed like that for a while, quiet content. No more pretending, no more unfinished rooms. Just two hearts that had finally found a place to rest.